You think you have your perfect family living in the house. Everything looks so good and your heart feels really full, and then you realize something wasn't right in the house, and you go behind this one door down to the basement, and there is all this trash, all these secrets, all these things that they're holding back.
My second marriage was also to a avid sex addict, highly deceptive, living a double life. I had no clue. I counted at least 17. I talked to him about it. He goes, yeah, that sounds about right. 17 women in 3 weeks. How do you know your relationship is intimately healthy and that the connection is what it needs to be? To talk about sex addiction, Cheryl Camarillo, a therapist as well as a social media content creator, joins me to talk about intimacy and what goes wrong with intimacy. So, Cheryl Camarillo, how did you get interested in working with this population?
So toxic relationships and the dynamic around that. I actually married my husband after 10 years of dating and found out that he'd had like a porn addiction, an alcohol addiction, all kinds of addictions situation going on. And I decided I was going to pursue the sex addiction therapy route because he was not doing anything for 9 months. No communication, very angry, disconnected. And, when we started this relationship, I was the princess to his world, classic narcissist kind of tendencies. And I flew towards that like a moth to the flame. But
It's hard not to, right?
yeah. I mean, it was a good start to the relationship, and we were actually a little bit detached because I was older. I was in my 40s. He was in his 40s as well. We lived 3 miles apart. We had our own lives, and when I found out that he was using porn, I did what most women do, or a lot of women do, is say, well, that's what men do. But he was like past the point of just occasional kind of stuff. And it was more of like, I don't care where I'm watching it. Doesn't matter, all day, every day. And that was kind of where I had to draw the line, mostly because I think my daughter asked, why does he watch women? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a huge, violation and sexual abuse in its own format. So I had to ask him to leave so that he could learn more about that. So that's kind of how I started in the field. And, when I went to my very first training on the first day, in the first hour, I met Dr. Adams, who was a specialist in adult children of sex addicts, but he also was a specialist in mother enmeshed men. And that was my husband. So, the mother-in-law whose every emotional need has got to be met by her son, that was my husband. So, Narcissist was his mother, and he was, following in some footsteps. So,
Wow. How did you find out? What was sort of because I can hear there's a massive shift that you went from not knowing to knowing, but what was sort of the discovery like?
the discovery of the narcissist enmeshment piece, or of the addiction piece?
No, the addiction piece.
It's I didn't know it was an addiction until I actually went to go see Dr. Patrick Carnes, because I was looking for anybody that specialized in sex and porn addiction, and so he was the guru, and he was going to be up in Dallas. So I drove up to Dallas and paid for a conference to be there. And while I was there were people that were 20 years, 30 years experienced. I'm looking around, and there is couples. It's like man and wife.
Yeah.
So couples therapist in there, and they're all trained in this. And I was like, well, this is a real thing. Better go do something. And then, I enrolled for that first training, and I came back, and I was super excited because I knew after the first, I traveled to Arkansas for the second part of the, let's find out why I can't get my husband on board, and returned home. And when I went to Arkansas, that's where I met Dr. Adams. And he had a lot of stories in his book, and I was checking his book out, and I was purchasing it, and I was like, my husband's story is a lot worse. His dad was a sex addict, so he'd taken him from secretary's house to secretary's house to secretary's house, and his mom found out because he said he wanted a toy. And what was happening was his dad was sitting him in front of the TV with all the food he wanted, all the toys he wanted, and all the TV. So there he is. That's what he learned. Guess what kind of addictions he ended up with as an adult? addicted
Yeah.
to, food, Food Network, Shopping Network, you name it, everything. But he was such a good man, that I was like, I can overlook. But when you stack all these things up and then you start looking at, well, this is like a long history in his family line, and then you start looking at what kinds of things or dynamics did you see in your own family? It just really started to hit home. And I run groups for men and women. I work with the sex addicts and porn addicts, and I also work with the partners in betrayal trauma. And it's the betrayal trauma piece. You're running groups and you're having discussions, and you're just realizing, oh my, that narcissistic trait that was there. And, oh, this like, self-involved, way of thinking that was there. And I went and trained with one of the best people I think in the field was Dr. Omar Minwala, and his training is in deceptive sexual trauma therapy. And so I got a certification with him. And he's like three-pronged. You got the behavior, you've got the entitlement, the narcissist piece, right? And you have the integrity issue, which is I'm a liar and I'm going to lie and I don't care that I'm hurting anybody. And it's when they finally start realizing this is a bigger problem and she's just not going to shut up about it, that it starts to turn into one of these things where a lot of the women are like, they have to get all of their emotions out, but then they have to come out on the other side empowered, strong, because these women are not like, weeping willows crying or anything like that. They are in the beginning, but if I've done my job right and they've done all their research and they're good researchers, they have studied everything and they have like learned to figure out like how to pull all the pieces together. And they're all women that I'm just like in awe of. They're like people that have accomplished things. They've raised their children. Their kids are doing great things. So I just have a big appreciation for the women on the other side of finding out about, some kind of sex addiction or porn addiction. And it's like a big puzzle. Like, where did this man get this issue from? And I told you my husband's. And then, the same thing, like what made me open to choosing a partner that was, in that direction. And, moth to a flame, I told you, tell me I'm your princess. And I was like, okay, well, oldest child of four, you had a lot of responsibilities. You didn't have a lot of like, you're the best girl ever kind of thing. But here's my husband giving me that. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where that went. So
It's very attractive. I don't know if you know my story. My second marriage, brief, thank goodness, was also to a just an avid sex addict as well,
mhm,
and highly deceptive, living a double life. I had
mhm,
no clue, no clue. I think I counted at least 7 women that he was having a relationship with during our engagement.
mm.
And then we broke up during one period in the marriage for a month, and I counted at least 17. I talked to him about it. He goes, "Yeah, that sounds about right." So he was just churning through women in a 3-week period. He did that in 3 weeks, 17 women in 3 weeks. Incredible. So let's break it down. Let's talk about, because by the way, I love Omar Menwala, and you're right. When you're the one who's experiencing betrayal trauma, you do devour everything you possibly can
Mhm,
because it's so gut wrenching.
mhm,
That's what it felt like to me. Like, I
mhm,
don't know what it was like for you, but it felt like my world shattered. I actually lost time. I
mhm.
checked out. My mind couldn't take it, and I
Yeah.
just lost time when I discovered that I realized I didn't know him. I essentially had married a stranger. It was on my honeymoon that I discovered this. So it
Me
was brutal.
too.
Oh, man. And I've heard that's not uncommon, by the way. I've heard that's really, I mean, and what a horrific way to learn it too.
Mhm, mhm,
Jeez. But let's talk about what's happening on the addicts
mhm,
side. And I also have a question too.
mhm,
Do you think that sex addiction is real, or do you think this is actually a manifestation of narcissism? I have a whole lot to.
mhm.
I really would love to hear your opinion on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. So it is very real and it's very painful. Sex addiction, porn addiction, infidelity. Some people will say infidelity, one time thing, that's not an addiction. It doesn't matter to me. It's the secret sexual basement that Dr. Manwala talks about.
Mm.
Like, you think you have your perfect family living in the house with just the right, curtains and the beautiful paints and the upstairs, downstairs, wonderful kids. Everything looks so good and your heart feels really, full. And then you realize something wasn't right in the house, and you go behind this one door down to the basement, and there is
Yeah.
all this trash, all these secrets, all these things that they're holding back that affect you on so many levels, like who you are as a person and how you trust other people, and like you're just going to be hit left and right. That's why it's so painful when you first realize this. And then on top of that, they're super not like smart about this. They're like, well, it's just my behavior and I'll change it and it's okay. And it's like, no, you have caused, like, you have hit a person's nervous system on so many different levels, and it's going to be really hard to stand back up. And, again, it's like, well, we don't see the damage. There's not a broken arm, there's not a black eye, but it's like, no, this is like to the core. You've hit the brain, you've hit the heart, you've hit the enteric system, the digestive system, like all of those communication systems knocked down.
I actually had a nightmare in the early part of that stuck out to me. I dreamed that my wedding dress was on the floor and he was partying with people and they were walking on it and tearing it into shreds. That's what it felt like to me. It
Yeah.
was like something that because I had been married before and he passed away from cancer, and he was a man of integrity. I mean, his word was his bond, to the point that if he promised you that he would help you move, which he didn't enjoy, but he would be happy to help you move. And he promised, but he woke up that morning with the flu, like the stomach flu,
Hmm.
he would still show up and help you because
Yeah.
he told you he was going to do that. So I went from incredible integrity to somebody that, man, there was a shred of integrity to this man, not a shred. So it was a devastating experience. So I had known what it felt like to have this sacred connection with
Hmm.
somebody, that where you create this private world of two people. You have a shared language, you
Hmm.
have shared stories, you have shared memories, and there's an intimacy that you two of you have that's unique to the two of you. And I realized this guy, not only did he not we didn't have it, but I don't know if he even knew it existed, and he didn't even know what my problem was.
Yeah. So you're talking about experiencing two different extremes. And there's some people that go in and they're like, they have nothing to compare it to, and they spend 20 and
Mm,
30 years in there. I mean, you figured it out in a period of time.
yeah, pretty fast because I had had that 30 years with somebody else, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had known what a sexual relationship looked like, what or at least should look, reasonably. I'm not saying what I had with my first husband was perfect, but it was, healthy.
Hmm.
But then to see this to me was like, whoa, it's not even remotely the same. Which you're right, my heart does break for those who've never had the other experience because they're not the same.
Hmm.
But yeah, I could tell that he didn't know. I mean, and I also could tell he didn't want intimacy. He didn't want it with anybody, never. I mean, that wasn't what was going to happen.
Yeah, no, so like the piece that makes an addiction is that some people will look at what's going on in the brain. And when I'm working with men, I don't necessarily do the whole like 12-step thing. I feel like there's a brain-based issue going on here. And
Mm.
so I will work the trauma issue with them to try to get the shift going. They will be doing their work with 12 steps. But then the other side of that is I use neurofeedback. I use all kinds of brain interventions, brain hacking, like brain spotting, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Like I use the trauma therapies, and that's how I started, was working with men, thinking I don't want any other couples to ever have to deal with what I was dealing with. And then, I would work with the husbands, and the wives would come in and they'd be like, because I always made sure I met them, they'd be like, oh, great, his burden has been lifted and I feel like crap and I'm crying and I'm screaming and, I'm torn apart inside. I'm just
Yeah.
bleeding here. And that's why, like Dr. Manwala, it's like, you are the accident victim. Nobody's even looking at you because you're looking at the addict and saying, oh, just change your behaviors, or, oh, change how you think things through. And it's like, okay, I couldn't have that. I couldn't sit by and just watch women struggle and, could somebody turn the light on for me? Like, no, I didn't want that to happen anymore. So I started working with the women. And sometimes I do a system. If I think it looks like these couples are going to stay together, I'll work with the husband, I'll work with the wife, I'll do their couple sessions, and I will do their group sessions, because I also send people to my groups. I had to set up groups because these people were so much into secrecy that they didn't have anybody else to talk to. The women didn't have any other peers that they could go and talk to. The men were just like in the doghouse, shame and guilt, and they didn't think this problem was such a big issue, but she's making it an issue. Well, wow, wait, you're in a room with 20 other guys talking about how much pain their wives are in? Like, that was like a big plus there. So
Yeah. So let's talk about, why do you think sex addiction happens?
So when you look at it, you have to actually kind of like what you see on the surface is the behavior and the abuse. But if you actually go underneath the surface and try to figure out like what are all the pieces, because it's not just one thing, it's multiple pieces working together that shape this person into acting the way that they do. So if they've shaped into doing whatever it is that they're doing as far as acting out, then, you have a chance to be able to go in and say, can we make any shifts? Now, that's kind of a separate issue from a person with a narcissistic disorder. Those people have a whole other like thing going on with them. But when we're talking about sex addicts, we're talking about from 0 to 18, what kinds of things made you feel trapped? What kinds of things made you feel like you developed a thought process that said, it's okay if you lie, or it's okay if you shut down and you're afraid of attaching to people. Like those kinds of things, the attachment, any family trauma, anything that happened under 18 years of age, those things get imprinted and have to be worked out. Then there's the other piece, which is like, how did you learn about relationships? You can have relationship trauma or, be a part of relationship trauma and not know, maybe you didn't see your parents and how a healthy relationship should look like. And maybe you didn't know that men don't beat on women or women don't get online and have, affairs or this dating app stuff. Like there's so many different things that you didn't know. So 0 to 18, the next thing up is like gender shaping. Like it's the good old boys network. Like you're in the locker room and people are talking about who got to what base with which girl or who's the easiest girl to get with. Like some people say, well, that's a stereotype, but it's not a stereotype. It is a common language that they have. And how you show up in that language, if you choose that you want to act in that way, then you can justify and say, well, this is just what guys do. It's like what I did when I said pornography. Well, this is what guys do. And it was like,
Yeah.
no, not, not in, not in my case. It's not going to, and it's not going to continue. So that part, happens. It's the gender and what you've learned. And then the next level up is sexuality. Like, what did you learn about sex? Did anybody talk to you about sex, or did you learn things like piecemeal and, you took advantage or you had something happen, with the first relationship, the second relationship, like all of this stuff happening. And you just justify that that's the way it is. Cheating is acceptable or whatever. Those are some of the core pieces. And then there's also just the self, like, do you have self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence? If you don't have those, you could be seeking out all these people because you need the little hit of, attention. And I hear that too. Or mental health, like you're depressed and you're anxious or you're, fearful. Like acting out is one way to forget about those kind of mental health issues. So there's like multiple things going on and you have to go in and dig through all of that stuff and try to come up with the big picture. Like, what is this behavior about and what kinds of things need to happen? And even the personality things, like Dr. Manuela talks about, like there's features, there's traits, and there's disorders. So you can have people with narcissistic features and traits where they're very self-serving. And when you
Yeah.
talk about sex addiction, they ain't thinking about anybody else except themselves, right?
Yeah, I say they feel awfully entitled to that
Yeah.
action. Yeah.
Yeah, so the entitlement
Yeah.
is a big thing, but there's also other things like the obsessive compulsive kinds of things, like you need to do something, and that might be one of the things is to act out compulsively, just a variety of things.
In fact, I saw mine when he'd been long enough away from it. He did look like he was in withdrawal. I mean, he looked distressed, fidgety. You could tell that it was a dopamine withdrawal.
Mhm.
He was very uncomfortable in his skin. It
Mhm.
was, yeah. Here's the problem that I have with this, because I got to a very pessimistic perspective of it. Very
Been there.
pessimistic. Yeah, because the problem is they're so good at lying. They lie to themselves first.
Mhm.
So how do you know that there's any truth to what they're saying? Because they're often clumsy and leave stuff where it's discoverable, but they also can be incredibly secretive too, and very good at being secretive. So how do you ever know that any of this is authentic work?
I think part of that is also just, I think it's called relational theory, where there's this energy that goes on between yourself and another person. And when you've been hit with the deceptiveness and secretiveness and your trust level has now gone down to 0, now it's up to them to like show 100% authenticity, 100% transparency, and 100% honesty. And so if they're not doing those kinds of things, you as the partner are going to feel like if you ask a question and they just give you half the answer, or, if you're even asking something simple like, did you throw the trash out? And the trash bag is sitting right next to them and they go, yeah, I did it. Those kinds of things happen. I've had one guy say, why did I do that? It happened today in one of my sessions. Did you call so and so? And he's like, yeah, I called so and so. Like, how dare you question me? And she goes, did you call so and so? And he was like, yes, I did. And then she goes, did you call so and so? And he goes, no, I didn't. And I'm like, dude, you're like asking me, why is she staying angry with me? And I'm like, if you were truthful 99 times and the one time you lie, like you're sitting in here in a therapist's office and one tiny little lie, I didn't make the call. Why?
And plus, the trust just plummeted back down to 0, and now will be even harder to even build ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just crazy little things and then big things too. I mean, there's a 3-week factor sometimes I see people do. It's like, we've professed we're never going to do this again. And 3 weeks later they do it. I don't know what the number 3 is about, but 3 weeks later, I'm like, you gotta stay of, execution. And you just like threw it to the wind. It's like, you must have known you needed to do a lot more work, or, why would you decide after 3 weeks to go and do the same thing, go to a, see an escort, go to a massage parlor, use the dating apps.
Man, this is so devastating. And I love the fact that Manwala really sees it as abuse. How does you get it into them that because they just don't take the other person's perspective well? That's what I've noticed. It's just, there's not this, I mean, it's wild. They're good enough to have enough cognitive empathy to be able to weaponize it, to flirt, seduce, pull people into relationships that are that people are, I'm sure, shocked when they find out that it wasn't authentic. But yet there is this inability to see that the consequences of what they're doing is just ravishing that destroying, shredding that relationship. So help me understand that paradox.
So the use of abuse and abuser, that language, is really hard for them to accept. It's hard for me to accept sometimes to hear that word, because that means that somebody's purposefully, trying to hurt you, to me at least. And the thing is,
I guess I don't anymore think of it that way. I think we can all accidentally abuse people without meaning to.
Yeah.
We may even gaslight somebody just because we're feeling really insecure. We don't realize that we're creating confusion and pain in the other person. We're just like, I'm feeling awkward and put on the spot, so I'll just sort of flip it on them and make it a them problem.
Yeah. So Dr. Manwala's method, I think, is to just hold true to the title. You've abused, and he will look at integrity as, this has caused a hurt, and if you've caused a hurt, this is pain. And if this is pain, then you have trauma. And if you've traumatized somebody, that's abuse. So you have to, follow the line. And so I have to teach them to follow the line. But, when you're trying to get these men to get out of the shame and guilt spiral, because some of them actually do feel bad about what they've done. And narcissists won't necessarily, they might feel bad for a second, but then they just jump back on the horse of feed me kind of thing.
Exactly. In fact, I was talking to Dr. Peter Salerno. He said it isn't that they feel shame, it's that they feel humiliation.
Yeah, for the narcissist.
They just don't like being called out.
Yeah.
Because shame, and this is what Dr. George Simon makes a point of, often is a corrective experience. We don't like shame so much, though, that we're like, oh, what can I do to avoid that again? I don't see that with this group of people. They're willing to do it again,
Yeah, yeah. So if you're doing the Manwala work, you're going to drop out, but the ones who stick around for a while, the men will be like, I feel really sad. This is hopeless. How am I ever going to get past this? It's always going to be there. And it's kind of like, okay, well, good. You're going to have to work this whole intimacy pyramid, like the truth and honesty, the empathy. Like some of them just, take so long to understand what empathy means. They're like, oh, give me something to do around the house. And it's just kind of like, that's not what serving your partner is. It's like, if she's crying, are you going to stay there? Or if she says, get away from me, you're going to go off and play the guitar. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you stay nearby and you come and check on her and you do these kind of things. So it's just like teaching them how to do that. But the more that you talk about this, the more that it becomes clear to them, yeah, this is what I was doing. And it starts to become one of those things like, but I don't want to stay that person, because now they see who they really truly were. If they truly see who they were, then they're able to kind of keep working and move past that. But when you're talking about narcissism, they don't want to see themselves. There's reasons they
Right.
don't want to see themselves.
Yeah, that's really a good point. So this has been a fascinating conversation, and as you can tell, I've been down this road. I really,
Yeah.
yeah, I know this road. It's a painful one, a really painful one.
Mhm.
I would love to jump over to the podcast extra and talk to you about the people who don't know something's wrong, but they feel something's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you what I saw at the office when I was counseling people.
Uh-huh.
I started to see a pattern, and I'd love to know if you saw that pattern as well. But if somebody would like to know more about you, get in touch with you, learn about your work, how can they reach you?
Sure, they can go onto my website and send a contact form to me, or they can go onto any of my social media. A lot of I think it's Instagram, TikTok, and even my YouTube is at Sharing with Cheryl. And so you can catch some of my videos there. I'm like trying to plus that up, so I'm not too good at that. I'm much better right now in a podcast, but they can find me there, or they can, like I said, they can contact me, and I'll try to reach out to everybody. And I do individual, group, and couples work in my office, and I'm having, I think, 4 new groups starting up at the end of January, 2 for men using the Minwala method, and 1 for women with the Minwala method, because I'm currently working with women in a beta group, and so they've been with me for almost 15 weeks.
Are those the survivors, or are those
Survivors.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So you have a women's survivor group, and
Mhm.
you have 2 men who are the ones who have the addiction.
Yeah, and for the women's survivor group, there is like a male in there. So, but
Okay.
he has the same issues,
Sure.
a little bit different, because when he gets angry, it's scarier. So, because of experiences of what you've seen around.
Do you do remote work or only in-person work?
I will do telehealth work, and I will do coaching and consultation. Sometimes people just want to know, tell me about this.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate this. This was a fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of different directions we could have gone in. So thank you. This was really rich. I deeply appreciate it, Cheryl.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's 2 a.m. again, and you're replaying that whole conversation over, and you're wondering yourself, was it really that bad, or maybe I'm just being dramatic? So you start to draft that I'm sorry text again, because the guilt that you're feeling or the confusion you're experiencing is just unbearable. And you know this loop because you've been there before, but I want you to know that you're not alone. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a retired psychologist, and for 25 years, I've been helping people untangle exactly what toxic relationships do to your mind, how they create the confusion, the self-doubt, and that trauma bond that keeps pulling you back in. Here's the truth. Recovery isn't about getting more information. It's about having the right support in the exact moment you need it. That's why I've created Reclaim You. It's a private, always available coaching app built from my work and my content, organized into an extensive library that you can actually use when you're triggered. Inside it, you'll get 5-minute lessons when your brain can't handle a deep dive, check-ins that meet you exactly where you are, whether you're feeling strong, shattered, or numb. Boundary scripts that help you say no without over-explaining. Grounding tools that work fast when you're activated. And progress tracking so you can see proof you're healing, even on days when it feels like you're not. There's no appointments, no waiting, no judgment, just practical support right when you need it. Reclaim You, real help in real time, right in your pocket. And it's a coaching support, not therapy or emergency care. Learn more at studio.com/Dr. Kerry. So start your healing today and reclaim you.